If you're thinking about buying an electric car, you've got as much choice as you have ever had. At the smaller end of the market, you've got really good cars like the Renault Zoe and Peugeot e-208, which offer pretty good driving ranges and crucially are affordable. You've got slightly bigger cars like the Nissan Leaf, a car which helped kickstart the EV revolution in Europe. And now you've got newcomers like the Volkswagen ID.3, along with slightly bigger crossovers like the Kia e-Niro and Hyundai Kona Electric. Now, at the premium end of the market, you've got a few new players. This is the Audi e-tron. It's the first fully electric car from Audi. It's an SUV that goes up against some pretty good rivals. Cars like the Jaguar I-Pace, Mercedes EQC, and of course we have to include the Tesla Model X. So we're going to see how this fares against those rivals and show you through some of the details in it. And we'd love to know what you think about it, so tell us in the comments below. The e-tron is a pretty decent size. It's kind of in between a Q5 and a Q7, although it is a little bit lower for an SUV. Now the battery is a 95 kilowatt hour unit, and that's sandwiched down here in the floor of the car. Fully charged, Audi says it's around about 403 kilometers from a full charge. Now, to make it a bit more affordable, Audi also offers a slightly smaller size battery, which it badges as the 50. That's a 71 kilowatt hour battery, and that gives a full range of around about 333 kilometers in WLTP, which again is around about 300 kilometers in the real world. When it comes to charging, the Audi has a few tricks up its sleeve. As standard, it gets an 11 kilowatt charger, so that's going to do you for all your home charging and a bit of public charging. You can upgrade that to a 22 kilowatt onboard charger. Furthermore, it also comes with this DC charger, and this is a CCS type, and it will charge at up to 150 kilowatts. So that means that if you're doing a long journey and you're on a motorway, for example, you could pull into somewhere like an Ionity station and be able to fill up the battery much more quickly. As you might expect from a car costing upwards of 90,000 euros in Ireland, the interior is quite well finished. It's a very digital experience, and what I mean by that is there are very few buttons throughout the cabin. The view is customizable with the 12.3-inch display, and you can adjust it by pressing the view button on the steering wheel. It will show you your main things like your power usage, your speed, and range remaining. You can also go through consumption and various other trip computer things. You can scroll through and have the navigation display on the map and have that operate in a wider full screen mode, which is a bit more useful if you're using the navigation function. If you don't want to have that, as you're driving along, you can also have some of the navigation come up here on the in the smaller window of the speedometer as well, so it gives you turn-by-turn recommendations. There's also paddles on the back of the steering wheel for adjusting the amount of regen on the move. You then have a 10.1-inch display here, which does all of your infotainment system, your navigation. You can have Apple CarPlay running if you want to connect your mobile phone. And then below that, you have a second screen. This is an 8.6-inch unit. And this controls all the other functions like climate control, your heated seats, air conditioning, all that sort of stuff. It's also haptic feedback. So as you press the button, you actually get like a click back on the screen, and that makes it a little bit easier if you do want to adjust, for example, the temperature on the move. You can just individually press it up, or if you want, you can just press your finger in and then slide up and down, and it gives you an idea of what it's doing as you do that. So that's kind of useful. You can also use that lower screen to input certain things, like for example a destination with the sat nav. So you can just type in H like so, O-N-E, and it will pull up, for example, somewhere that you have saved or any sort of destination. You can also use that to search for contacts in your phone book. There's no traditional gear selector as such. You have a drive selector here. You can rest your hand on this and then put it down or towards you to engage drive, or push it away to engage reverse. And then you've got the park button there on the side. You've also got an electric handbrake. Thanks to that, you've got extra space here in the center console. There is a nice storage area, which then also includes 2 cup holders. There's a wireless charging pad here on the side, and you've got 2 USB ports and a storage area in there. So it's pretty good. There's even a reasonably sized glove box, so it's a good amount of space. In terms of rear passenger space, the e-tron scores pretty well. I've got a lot of legroom here, as you can see, and there's even space for me to fit my feet underneath the seat in front if I want to stretch out a bit more. There's pretty good amounts of headroom. I'm 5'9" and I've no issues in that regard. And because there isn't a bulky transmission tunnel in the middle of the car, whoever's sitting in a middle seat isn't as hard done by as in some other SUVs. Furthermore, both of the outer seats feature ISOFIX points, and it's quite easy to reach as well. They're not buried in underneath the seat. You've got a central armrest that you can fold down if you're not going to use your rear seat, and you've got a little storage area in there too. Around the back you have this distinctive light bar that goes all the way across the rear. I think it looks really smart, especially at night. When you open the rear tailgate, which is electrically operated, you have this 605 litres of boot space. It's pretty good, but if you need more, you can fold the rear seats forward by just pulling these levers. They have a 60-40 split, and when they're tumbled forward, you get an even load level all the way across, and you get a total capacity of 1,755 litres. That should be enough for pretty much anybody. Along with the cargo capacity in the back, there's also a front storage area. Measures 60 litres, but it's fine for throwing in your charging cables rather than having them rolling around in the back. Having that 95 kilowatt hour battery does effectively dispel range anxiety for most people. You see, with a full range, it will do just over 400 kilometers or so, Audi says. Now, in reality, that will differ a little bit because in winter you're going to be driving with the heating on, and you know, everyone's journey is slightly different. But one thing where the e-tron does excel is when you get onto the motorway, because first of all, it comfortably has enough power. Generally, it will run at 308 horsepower, but you do have a sport or a boost function which will up that to 408 horsepower. So that's pretty good. So it will comfortably cruise along at motorway speeds. No need to sit in an inside lane at 80 kilometers an hour. Now, obviously, driving on a motorway is the sort of thing that always puts an EV on its back foot because it's not getting a chance to harvest energy or to recuperate energy, and you're just essentially running down the battery. But that said, if you're doing purely motorway driving, it is reasonably efficient as it moves along, and to that end, I suspect you'll probably should be expecting about 240 kilometers in between fills. Now, that's at steady 120 kilometers an hour, so you know, that's fine. You're going to probably want to stop after maybe 150 or 200 kilometers anyway. And as now we see an improvement in the charging network, particularly along motorways or along major routes, that is a help too. So there's not quite the same amount of military planning required if you're going to make a long journey in an EV. So in that respect, the e-tron does hold itself pretty well. Now, that is with this 55 version. Obviously, that isn't the same for the slightly smaller 50 version, because that has a smaller battery. But for the most part, if you're going to do long range driving more frequently, a car with this size of battery is the way to go. But it's when you get the e-tron off the motorway that it really starts to show just how refined a car it is, because you have that air suspension that soaks everything up oh so well, and even running on these larger wheels, you know, bumps and potholes aren't really that much of an issue at all. You barely notice them. It's just a distant thud, and it just rounds everything off quite nicely. Now, you can obviously then alter how that ride is, so you've got different modes in the drive select function, and you can put it into a dynamic mode, which brings the car down a little bit in ride height and kind of firms everything up a little bit. So, you know, if you want to have a bit more of a sporty drive, you can do that. But really, this car is more about refinement, I feel. It's so well insulated in terms of the amount of sound coming into the cabin is very, very low. There's a faint electrical whir for the most of the time, but it's not something that kind of bothers you. And it's just very, very comfortable, and I think that's what a lot of people like. I mean, after all, if you're going to go and drop this much money on a premium high-end quality car like this, you expect to have that quality. You want it to be quiet, you want it to be well made. There are no rattles in this car at all. I've been spending several days here, and normally after a while, especially if you don't have any of the radio on or the music on, you can start to hear little creaks or rattles. And I have to tip my hat to Audi. In this case, there is nothing in this car. It is absolutely perfect. And even when you come to a stop, all you can really hear is the air conditioning fans, if you've maybe got it on a setting above 2. It's very, very quiet. And that in itself, combined with having no gears, so it's just a single speed and no vibration from the engine, it makes it a real stress-free drive. It's just comfortable. You're not bothered about doing any sort of distance in this. The seats are supportive. You've got very good visibility too. You've got big door mirrors. Now you can have the camera system, but having tried that back when I drove the car first at its international launch, as good as they are, or as the novelty of them as they are, I just didn't find them quite as good to use in real life as just conventional mirrors. So I would save the circa 1,600 euros that it costs to add those to the car and spend it on something else, or just keep it in your back pocket. But back to the e-tron. So as I said, if you're doing long motorway journeys, expect to get around about 240, 250 kilometers between charges. That's what, certainly from talking to owners, that's what they're typically seeing with this car. Now, when you get away from the motorway, it does actually pick up quite a bit. Now, typically, I think about 350 kilometers, closer to 400 is a realistic figure if you're primarily just doing a lot of driving in a city or at urban speed, so you're not really getting up to high speeds and you've got a lot of opportunities to regen. So as you slow down, it's harvesting energy, and that will prolong the battery range in between charges. But I think for most people, you can probably get away with having to charge this maybe only once or twice a week, and that's so convenient. Now, it's worth talking about regen for a moment as well, because the Audi's quite clever in how it does it. In the front, there are some sensors that are obviously used for things like cruise control and various different driver assistance systems. But what I found is that when you're driving along, if a car in front is slowing down, it will actually automatically increase the amount of energy being harvested. So it will slow the car down a little bit more, because it's seeing that, oh, hang on, there's a car in front, we're going to have to slow down anyway. I'll use this as an opportunity to get a bit more charge back into the battery. That's very handy. It's quite nice. I wouldn't be entirely reliant on it as a form of braking, but you do just start to feel that as you come up to a slower moving vehicle in front, that it will start to just increase the regen. So all the time the car is trying to improve its efficiency. It's trying to generate more energy back into the battery. So that's good as well. That's a nice feature. It's becoming a very common feature, but it's good that it's thinking with that sort of mindset, and that's across various different drive modes as well. Now, you've also got, in terms of efficiency, there is an efficient drive mode, and that will do things, for example, that when you lift off the accelerator, when you take your foot off the accelerator, it will just sail, so it will effectively freewheel. And that means that you can give it a prod, and if you know that you've got maybe a slight downhill section coming up, you can see that the energy consumption goes down to 0 from the motors, and it just sails along. And it will do that for quite a distance, actually. It's impressive at how long it will actually maintain that speed before it starts to creep down and you maybe need to give it another prod. So that's pretty good. And then obviously you've got, sport modes, so you can obviously, do standing starts that are very, very quick. I don't really see the point in doing them, but if you want to do it, you know, it will give you a 0 to 100 in a little under 6 seconds. I get people want to do it maybe to show off to their friends of what an electric car will do, but realistically I think once you've done it once or twice, the kind of novelty wears off. And I've just pulled away from the traffic lights. I got up to 80 kilometers an hour very, very quickly. I didn't have the need to do any sort of particular start modes or anything like that. So it's a fun thing to have. Some people will like it, but I think once you've done it a few times, that novelty wears off. In terms of handling, the e-tron actually does a pretty good job. Now, it's worth mentioning that this is a heavy car. It tips the scales at over 2,400 kilos. So all that battery below you is heavy, but it is below you. So, you know, it's not that top heavy a car. So the center of gravity is lower. That does improve the handling. And also you've got 2 motors, so it's driving both axles. That also helps in terms of, you know, shifting the power around and helping grip. So in that respect, it's good. It does handle well. As I've said, if you engage the sport mode or dynamic mode, it does hunker down a little bit more, and obviously that all helps. But really, this is more of a car about comfort, about refinement, rather than outright performance or pace. And I think if you go into it expecting that, I do not think you'll be disappointed. It's not as sharp to drive, for example, as the Jaguar I-Pace is. That's got a great chassis, especially with the adaptive air suspension as well. But this is just, it's a car that really, if you can live with the range, and I think most people can, it's a very well put together car. The quality appears to be really exceptional in that respect, and it's just very normal. And I don't mean that as a kind of an insult to the car. The fact that this is just so normal and so competent at what it does on the day-to-day stuff, I think that's what will really help shift people towards electric cars. This is just a normal car that happens to be powered by a large battery and electricity. With its mix of conservative styling, high quality interior, and decent battery range that pretty much eliminates any sense of range anxiety, the Audi e-tron is right up there at the sharp end of the premium electric SUV segment. Yes, it costs upwards of 90,000 euros, but you do get a sense of value for money when you drive it, in terms of just how refined and how polished that driving experience is. It's not without its rivals, but it's certainly right up there among the sharp end of the pack. If you want to know more about the Audi e-tron, head over to CompleteCar.ie. You'll find a full detailed review of this, along with detailed reviews of all of those rivals. And as ever, please do get involved in the comments below and tell us what you think of the Audi e-tron, because we value your opinion there as well. If you'd like the video, please do give it a thumbs up. Please hit the notification bell if you want to get alerted to our next video review when it goes live. And as ever, please do subscribe to the Complete Car YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.